What's up, guys? We're going to choose podcast. My name is Salman Ali at Salman Ali NBA on Twitter. I want to apologize to everyone listening right now and my guest today because I actually did not plan to have this guest on today. I did plan on having this guest on for the 250th episode of Red Nation Hoops, and I was going to record our segment next week. And so I had to, our last guest, I guess he pushed back, actually. He pushed back on me this morning. And so I'm having to readjust on the fly. And I'm not well prepared for this episode. I have my notes on my computer and on my easel here, but I'm really disorganized. I feel about as unprepared as I've ever been for a podcast. But we're gonna roll with it because Dan and I have done a lot of podcasts together. We have good chemistry, so I think we'll make it work. Dan Favale of Bleacher Report, by the way, is the guest. I probably should have introduced that, but again, I'm so scattershot today. I can't,
Look, you told me this is when you were supposed to record, so you should probably be having like a little bit together. And I feel like
it wasn't this podcast topic though. It was going to be a different topic entirely.
How do you think I feel? I'm just gonna go, but that's like how I record my own podcast, no prep whatsoever. But I think I should probably be offended. This is the second time in a row I've been a backup rather than the actual guest. I'm gonna start taking offense to it.
You were gonna be the actual guest next week. That's what's like. I'm actually like rushing your part, and you were going to be on episode.
This because I would have not been able to do it next week. So this is just absolutely perfect.
Well, I mean, the good thing is episode 250 is in 2 weeks, so we would have actually been able to record that within that 2 week time frame. I'm just pre-recording tapes right now, but yeah, I wanted to have you on for 250 because, like, of course, why would I not have Dan on for 250? And like now I have to come up with another guest to fill that slot because we're taking up this topic. But you
just can't make it the guest who canceled on you because you need someone who's gonna be there for 250.
No, that guy's done. He's not done, but he's not gonna be on 250. He's not gonna be on 250.
Well, I'm excited. This is gonna be interesting to check in on because, like you said, I didn't realize it was so long ago in March, but I guess that makes sense. That we did this exercise.
We should probably explain what the exercise is. So we are right, yeah. So I last did this exercise on your podcast in March where we ranked the rebuilding teams, right? And I wanted to do a check-in on this since a lot of time has passed, 5 months, and our order has probably changed. I know you don't know your order off the top of your head right now. I kind of know what my order was, but it's definitely changed around just looking at it right now. Just based off what these teams have done since then. So the rebuilding teams are the following. The Portland Trail Blazers, the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Houston Rockets, the Sacramento Kings, the San Antonio Spurs, the Indiana Pacers, and the Orlando Magic. So
we need to add the Jazz in there now too.
Should we? Do we?
They traded Gobert and like Mitchell's on the block, so I feel like
it's so early though. I guess we could, but it's like they're probably still going to be good as of right now. Looking at their roster, if they enter the season, they're probably still going to be good enough to not qualify.
You think? I think they're going to be terrible. Like if they don't trade Mitchell, Danny Ainge is just he's gonna trade everybody else. Like if he's not, right. I don't think he's just gonna keep the.
They traded Russell O'Neal too, right? Yeah, it's two. Yeah, I mean. That is interesting. How good do we expect Utah to be next year? I think they're going to be like. Somehow
better than the Kings. If this is the roster, are they better than the Kings? It's funny because I bet you the Kings don't think they're rebuilding, and we're ranking them among the rebuilding teams. I find that hysterical.
I mean, I guess we'll see. You and I think of this completely differently, so we'll get into this disagreement in a minute. But like. I actually do think the Kings are going to be pretty good this year, and we'll talk about that in a second.
Oh boy.
So we're ranking these teams' futures, right? So I'm guessing, what's the criteria for this? You want to rank immediate futures, or do you want to rank the brightest futures in general?
Or are we like ranking them ahead of just for this season, or are we thinking like we're trying to project like 5 years out?
We're just trying to project, as in like which team like can we like definitively say like this team has a higher ceiling than this team, right? Kind of like that.
But you know what long term or just for next year was my question.
Whenever they hit their ceilings.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So like so if you feel like a better certainty about one player, about one team reaching their peaks, you might rank them ahead. It really depends on how you want to do this. If you want to project out on a team, you can do that. You can put them higher on your list. If I want to, just be like really practical about it, I'm going to put them higher on my list. Like we can kind of do it how we want to do it, but essentially we're ranking what we believe the ceilings of these teams are.
Got it. So we're not taking into account the assets that they have to get better.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah, you
okay.
can project.
Okay.
Yeah, like there's a lot of projecting in this, right? Because we don't know, right? We don't know what their ceilings are going to be. Okay. Who wants to go first?
I can start. I think so. I'm gonna put the Blazers. We're going worst to first, right?
Okay, let's do that.
So I'm gonna have the Blazers there at, I guess, would they be 7 or 8? Are we including Utah? Did we figure that out yet?
Let's do
I think
it.
they need to be in here. I think
Let's
they
do it.
gotta
Let's
be.
do it. Let's do it then. Let's
So
do it.
I'm gonna have Portland at 8. And
Okay.
I think that there's a chance they reach their peak before anybody else because they have Dame and they have Nurkic and they have Jeremy Grant. They should be probably the best team among this group next season, but I just don't know what that peak is. It might be 5th in the West. And I think when you look at these other teams, their peaks are going to be so much higher because of the blue chip prospects they have in place. And I actually think Portland had a pretty good offseason. I'm not a fan of, I don't see why they had to extend Dame, but if you went out and tried to trade, you can't now, but let's say you could trade Dame right now, the offers that you had for him before are not going to get any worse now because he has those extra 2 years on his deal. And I think people need to take that into account. And I'm a big fan of Anthony Simons. I think that to get Jeremy Grant for such a low cost was good. They were able to get Shaedon Sharpe, who a lot of people think could be the best person in the draft. They have Hart. I like GP2, but there doesn't feel like there's some upside because of Simons and Sharpe, but it feels sort of finite because those two are not going to peak, and especially Sharpe when you like during Dame's title window. And so I think this is a team that will fight for the playoffs this year unless there's a catastrophic injury. But if you're trying to project forward and talking about upside, I think it's very clear. Like I would make a case for them above the Kings if I really had to, but I think it's pretty clear that like their window is so now, and yet they're not really built to win at the highest level now.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this does really depend on what you think of Shaedon Sharpe, right? Because if you think he is like a generational type talent, like somebody who can come in immediately, make an impact, and be like one of the best players in the league by year 2, right? Which is like the absolute like apex. Like we're talking like the Jordans, the Magic Johnsons, like those are the guys that can do that. LeBron, right? Like if you think he's that guy, then yeah, Portland's probably higher on your list. I don't think he's that guy. I think he's very good. And if they had just done that this offseason, I might have them higher on the list. I actually do. I'm right with you. I had them 8th on the list that last time, and I guess I have them 9th on the list this time because we're including the Kings, the Jazz in this. So yeah, I'm with you. They have to be at the bottom because it's like last time I was like, what are you selling me? You're selling me Anthony Simons. You're selling me like Nasir Little or like Trendon Watford. Like I like Trendon Watford actually, and I do like Anthony Simons, but like those guys aren't, what you build a core around, a nucleus around. And like, what else did they do this summer? I think they signed Anthony Simons to that ridiculous contract. What was it 4 years?
Why is it ridiculous? It's
$100 million
with a cap going up to like 150 very soon. I think that's fine. The season he had last year,
$100 million. I guess I do still have to do some readjusting in how I think about the cap. But okay, what does that average out to in like today's cap? Right? Is that's going to be like what, an $18 million a deal?
It was 4 for 100, so it averages out to 25.
No. What I'm saying is like, what is that? What is that? What is that today?
In the 18 to 20 range, which is fine for someone who can hit off the dribble jumpers at the ridiculous clips that he can. It is funny though that they go from Dame and CJ to Dame and Ant. It's just a little funny that they had 2 small guards before, and now they still have 2 small guards.
Right. Like, again, like that's still too much money for me. I wouldn't pay him that much. Like I would probably, like the most I'd be comfortable paying him is probably 17. Like just because when you're this type of team, you can't be giving out that kind of money. Yusuf Nurkic for like 4 years. What was it? 70 million. Okay, that's reasonable. That's reasonable.
Oh, I actually thought that was bad.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know what the center market was that he got 470. Mitchell Robinson got 460. I have zero idea. I
wouldn't have done it, but I think it's a reasonable deal for him. Like I wouldn't have done it for the Blazers. Like if I'm the Blazers,
believe that he's going to be an average to above average defensive player for the entire life of that contract, and I just don't think he is younger than I think people realize. This deal takes him to like his age 31 or age 32 season or whatever it is, but I don't have that confidence. I thought like 455, like that area felt like more apropos.
Yeah, I think this is probably what I would say his market value would have been. I think like the center market, it really depends on what you think the center is in today's NBA, right? If you think they're all like really disposable and like unless you're Jokic or Nurkic, like you shouldn't be getting a lot of money, which a lot of people believe that. I actually don't believe that. I think there is a middle ground there, and I think he would fall in that middle ground. And so if it really depends on what you think of centers, right? Or on if you think that deal is fair. So I think there's a range for the your Nurkic's, the Clint Capellas, those guys to get paid, and I probably would have paid him something like this.
Wow, I would not have. I absolutely would not have done that. I'm more
I mean,
comfortable with the Gary Payton II contract by far, and I know people were up in arms that they gave him a player option at the end, but I don't really care about that.
what is $70 million? I mean, in 4 years in the modern NBA, what is that? 12, like a $48 million
It's
4 year
just
deal.
I think you can pretty easily make the case that Nurk is not going to be part of your best playoff lineups if you get that far. And so if I'm going to pay anybody that type of money that's not on the perimeter, if it's a big or if it's like a true forward, like I want them to be guaranteed to be on the floor in high leverage playoff moments. And there are going to be certain matchups where that's just not going to work for Nurkic because a lot of what he can do on defense is like drop coverage, and there's not a lot else that you can really do with him. And I know Portland tried some different things last year. Maybe it gets better this year, but I don't think the deal is going to age into one of the worst contracts in the NBA. To be clear, I just think when you have to pay Grant after this year, if you want to keep Josh Hart, you got to pay him too. You just paid Ant, you paid Dame until Kingdom Come now. That just felt like a stretch too far for me, especially because who was giving Nurkic 4 and 70 on the open market? And the answer is nobody. Indiana wasn't giving him that contract. The Spurs weren't giving him that contract. The Magic certainly weren't going to give him that contract. So I do know that it's more than a business in the sense that you can't always play. I think the Cavs, for instance, are over leveraging themselves with Colin Sexton. I think how they were handling this is absolutely bonkers. But like, I thought there was more of a middle ground than this. 470 treats him like he's one of your most important players over that 4-year span. I just don't think he is that to them.
I just think that's going to be starter money in a few years for
It
center.
might be, but like it's weird that you're comfortable paying Nurkic 4 and 70 when he's
Well, yeah.
older, plays a position that's objectively more disposable. He's objectively more disposable what he does than what Ant does. The off the dribble
Well,
shot
it's
creation
$30 million more money. That's why.
over 4 years. That amounts to like $7 million a year, and
Right.
he's
Like,
younger.
yeah, that's a lot.
Deals over.
You're talking about a mid-level exception. Like I mean, not I guess a mid-level exception is like 10 now, but the whatever the old mid-level exception is. That's a lot of money more.
I think he's paid like a top 15 center right now. I need to double check. And do you think Yusuf Nurkic is a top 15 center through and through over the course of this deal?
He's in the 15 to 20 range.
Again, I don't think it's a massive overpay. It's just I'm shocked that you're fine with that, but you like care a lot about the Simons deal.
Here's what I'll say. I think it's more. I would be more surprised if Nurkic is the contract that gets dumped versus Simons.
That is a wild take.
Yeah, I just that's a lot. You're talking about by the time he is how old is Simons? 25, like 23 right now. He's 23, right?
This deal takes him through his 26 season, so I think he's 22, maybe.
Okay, he's 22.
Whatever.
Okay, so by the age of 24, he's gonna have $50 million remaining, right? And I'm not even talking about his age. I'm just describing how close into his contract the Blazers may not need him anymore. And I think.
Why would they not need him? He could actually be part of a rebuild. Nurkic cannot, and I think that contract is a lot harder to move than Anthony Simons is because teams will look at his youth and his offensive skill set.
Okay. Jeremy Grant. I like Jeremy Grant. I'm not sure if I like that trade for them, but I think I don't hate it too much. Gary Payton. I actually really like the signing. Like I think that's not bad. Again, Shaedon Sharpe. I slam dunk, right? Like every team would have taken him at that spot. I think I love that pick, and I think I would have loved to see what he could have done in summer league had he not gotten hurt. But they didn't do anything to improve their prospects long term. I think that's the real thing here.
Yeah, I think a lot of Shaedon Sharpe would be tied to that, but it's also how are you able to develop him when you have what is a fairly immediate timeline still? That's going to be interesting to see how they juggle that once he's healthy.
And it seems like this is an organization that may be for sale soon. I mean, like it seems
They
like they're gonna
cut.
have to be.
They're not having their broadcast team travel with the team anymore. So they're already starting to cut costs apparently, which is
Right.
wild,
Right.
wild. Unless the broadcast team asks for it because they're still worried about COVID, which totally acceptable. But I have a feeling that was not the case, and so that's just an abominable decision by the Blazers.
Right. I think the league wants Jody Allen to sell, and Jody Allen doesn't want to sell. I believe that's kind of what's going on, right?
If
And
this
like,
is the cost cutting maneuvers they're taking, the Blazers need to be fucking sold. If that's, I don't, excuse me if you can't curse on this podcast, but
no, go ahead.
that is
Yeah.
just absolutely asinine. In like part of the experience of the broadcast team is like being there, developing relationships with people so that you can fill airtime with these different quotes and stuff. Now you're just going to have them in a studio for forever away. That is just like, how much are you really saving? What is that doing to your bottom line on $1 billion franchise? It's just like, come on,
No.
that is so like just unnecessarily penny pinching.
Yeah, and like they clearly are keeping Dame around for that next regime to step in and have that French.
Isn't that
Like that's the
backwards?
reason.
Let's
Yeah,
pay
yeah,
Dame
it's
60
it's
million
bad.
a year
Yeah.
when he's 40, but like we can't pay the broadcast team to travel with the club. That's just so weird.
Yeah, it is weird, but I mean, listen, Dame's gonna probably be worth that contract for at least the majority of it, right? Like I don't know about the tail end, right? Like I think it's likely he probably is still worth a good percentage of that money, whatever he's getting paid at that point. What he's gonna be 37 at that point, right?
I think it's 36, 37, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, he's probably gonna be paid like at least like 70% or whatever that money is at that point. But it's just you're locking yourself in, kind of like when you don't need to be, kind of like the Washington Wizards with Bradley Beal, right? Like, they're kind
Right.
of doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not including the Wizards in this, by the way. I feel like you're about to ask that. No way.
We're at a terrible pace right now. So
Yeah,
this is number 8 would be.
number 8. Yeah,
Were the Cavs in this exercise when we first did it? They should be, right? Or no, they weren't because they were
I
so good when we recorded it.
yeah they were too good. I think they're still gonna be pretty good next year too.
Yeah, I guess you can make the case that they don't just belong. But anyway, number 8 for me, since you said there's 9 teams now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Number 8 is the Kings for me. I think
Mm.
even if you're higher on them, you need to explain the long-term upside to me. Sabonis and Fox are still relatively young. I think the fit on offense was fine for them. Keegan Murray, I know people were up in arms that the Kings didn't take Jaden Ivey because they think he'd be the best player available. The Kings could have taken Jaden Ivey and people would have been ticked off because they already have De'Aaron Fox on the roster. It was like a no-win pick for the Kings. And I actually like Keegan Murray's fit. I like the movement shooting that he's going to provide. He looked a little bit better defensively than I thought during Summer League, but he's not someone who's going to turn into this A++ player. And now you don't have that prospect on the team without Halliburton anymore. And so while your team should be entertaining, you've surrounded De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis with a bunch of shooting. I don't know what the path is to them having a good defense. It's Davion Mitchell, Harrison Barnes, and Keegan Murray defending their butts off. But like, where is that getting you to in the Western Conference? And so it might be a little bit unfair that some of these teams are being judged against how far they can rise up the East, but that's just the landscape right now. I still don't see the path to the Kings being more than a playoff team. And if we ranked, which we should not do right now, but if like we were trying to pick the top 10 teams in the West, I'm not going to guarantee that they're among the top 10. I think the only teams for sure that they're going to be worse than is OKC and Houston by design. I think Utah and San Antonio by design. So I guess technically there's like up for grabs, a free for all, like between who's that 5th team, because you need to be better than 5 other teams to make the play-in. So I don't think that they're quite there yet. And I don't know what their path out of there is. They traded like the first round pick in theory for Kevin Huerter isn't a terrible idea, but it's protected in such a way that it's probably not going to convey for a while unless you think the Kings are going to be really good. And it's protected until the end of time. So it
prevents
other trades that much harder. So I don't see, the more I'm talking, I almost want to put the Kings behind the Blazers at this point.
So I have them higher. I'm trying to decide what I want to do here. If I want to talk about them right now, or do I wait till we get to that point in the list? I think we'll wait till we get to that point in the list. All right, I have San Antonio here at 8. San Antonio. So I really like what they're doing. Like as a front office, like they're doing all the right moves. They just don't have much of a nucleus yet, right? For me to get optimistic about and get high on. Like it's not that I don't. It's not like they're not doing the right things. Like this is not a criticism of their front office. They're stripping down the right way. It's just way too early. We're like in like phase 0 of the rebuild, you know?
Yeah, I'd be with you. Probably. I mean, I'll have the. Actually, we could probably get into. Would I have them next? I probably would have the Spurs at 7, which isn't really an insult. It's just like you said. It's a little bit. It'd be between them or the Jazz, I guess. But the Jazz still, in theory, have Mitchell. I
Mhm.
really like Josh Primo, and I don't know if people have watched enough of him. I think he's going to wind up being really good and someone who can give you a lot of just creation off the dribble and change of pace off the dribble as well. And he'll be a better shooter from like running your offense than I believe DeJounte Murray ever was. The Keldon Johnson extension, even if you don't think he's an A-plus player, which I don't think he is either, that's a steal.
Yeah.
4 years and 70, I think it's 74 or 76 with the potential to get to 80.
He's awesome.
I love Devin Vassell. I actually really love Jeremy Sohan for them too. I'm a little bit lower on him now that I know Chip Anglin won't be in San Antonio to help him with his shooting, but he's a really smart player when it comes to moving the ball and just the decisions he makes on defense. And I think a lot of their value, similar to what's going to be happening with Utah, if we're assuming Donovan Mitchell is gone, you look at the future draft equity they've picked up, and I'm talking about into the distance. So you have the Bulls pick. I think it's in 23, right? That's their order. No, they have the 25 Bulls pick, do they not? So yeah, they have that, and then they get the 28 pick swap from Boston, which is far enough in the future, and then you get those 2 firsts plus a swap, all of them unprotected from Atlanta. After it all post dates the Murray deal right now. So there's a chance things go belly up in there, plus all your own picks, the incentive to tank now because you don't owe picks to anybody else. And so even if you say that their blue chip cornerstone of the future is not on this roster, they're going to have enough enticing bites at the draft apple that you can reasonably assume they will get that player sooner rather than later.
It's so weird that the Spurs became like a normal NBA team overnight. Like before, they just never engaged with the rest of the market, right? And then Brian Wright comes in like 2018 or something, and like they're operating like a normal rebuilding team. They're not hanging on. They're like actually like trying to make trades, strip down the roster. Let's rebuild. Let's do a proper rebuild. Like the DeJounte Murray trade was shocking to me. It was shocking, not because of the value. I mean, some of it was the value, but like because they did it, just because they did it. Like I would have never thought they would have done that kind of a trade, just because you thought the conventional wisdom all along was like they're going to keep this team good enough for while Pop is in the latter years of his career, and like they're not doing that. They're doing what they need to do as a franchise at this stage in the rebuild.
Yeah, I'm with you. Who did you have at 7?
I had Orlando.
Yeah.
So I like Orlando. Like I like Orlando a lot. And it's not because I don't like Paolo Banchero. It's because I think Utah, has some more flexibility upside wise. I'm projecting more with them. But Orlando, I think, Paolo Banchero, I can't believe like it was a shock to people that he should be like a number 1 pick candidate. Like the guy was amazing. Like not before he got into the NBA, he was like a great facilitator, great scorer. Isn't this kind of what we're looking for in the NBA? Like shooting, dribbling, passing, and size. And for some reason, like there was like a snobbiness in the way we talked about him. Like oh, he can't defend, so it's hard to build lineups around him. Like okay, he has a weakness, right? Like that's fine. Like all these prospects have weaknesses. Why weren't we talking about like Jabari Smith like that with his ball handling? Right? Like for some reason, like defense it was like the fetishization of defense, like the fact that this is what's preventing him from being a number 1 pick candidate. And I'm so glad he actually went number 1. But I'm a little disappointed in us, like the NBA, like basketball Twitter, that it took us so long to visualize him as that kind of player. And he's perfect for Orlando. Like this is exactly what they need. They've been drafting all these defensive prospects, right? Like these guys who really can't do much on the offensive end. And they finally have someone to tie it all together. A guy who can be the centerpiece of your offense. And this is perfect for Jalen Suggs because I still like him a lot. I might have been wrong on.
We've veered, or people veered too far from reality with Jalen Suggs. He had a tough rookie year, but rookie years are often nightmares for guards, and they gave him so much of like the agency over.
And
he
was injured. Yeah,
he did. He was picked up injured, and like, but you just look at the responsibility he was saddled with because Markelle Fultz was injured for a ton of the year. RJ Hampton kind of sucked. You had Cole Anthony as your best guard, probably, or Gary Harris, depending on how you want to look at it. But they gave him a lot of responsibility, and I think Banchero streamlines a lot of that for him and others as well. I'm surprised you actually have them this low.
Well, I mean, it's because I really like the freaking Gobert trade was masterful. Like,
Well, so we should.
yeah, let's talk about. I have Utah next.
Well, I have
Is
Utah next too, so we both have them at 6.
right.
Oh no, I have
So
them.
who do you have at 7 then? I'm sorry.
I did we go out of order? I think I was supposed to go first, and then somehow made you go 7 first. That's my bad. Was that
No,
8 for you? Was Orlando 8?
Orlando was 7. I had let me go back to my list. So I had Portland. I had Portland at 9. I had San Antonio at 8, and I had Orlando at 7, and Utah was going to be my 6th, but I guess we went out of order.
So I had the Spurs at 7 because I did go first. I had Portland at 9, Sacramento at 8, San Antonio at 7. I have Utah at 6, so that's why I figured it'd be a good segue to. And so do you. All right, so we were on the same page. Yeah, I think I don't hold them back for this, but if I thought they were going to keep Donovan Mitchell, I might slingshot them higher because now all of a sudden you have Donovan Mitchell and Jared Vanderbilt, of course, is interesting. And Walker Kessler, I watched a lot of film on. I don't see a lot of people think he's like could be a Gobert type defender. I just don't see the quickness, like him being as quick as Gobert there. But that's interesting. And then now you have all these picks. That's a lot of pliability when you're talking about going on the trade market or getting bites at the draft apple down the line. But because we know they're going to trade Donovan Mitchell at some point, the entire value of this rebuild is rooted in picks, not any player that's already on the roster. And I think that puts them at a position of weakness relative to others. And the only reason I don't actually have them behind San Antonio is because they're just going to have so many fucking picks that like one of them is going to be like this wild blue chip spot in the lottery at some point, whether it's from Minnesota or look, if you wind up betting against the futures of Minnesota and the Knicks, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be in a damn good spot because those two franchises have historically missed the mark. I think Minnesota, I'm actually really high on moving forward, but the chances are you're going to get either not only your own bites at the draft apple, but some higher end ones in the lottery at some point from the Mitchell trade and or the Gobert trade, or you fold those over into a trade for a better player if he becomes available. Should you actually find like what if they win? What if they're so bad next year? Which if they trade Mitchell's not off the table, they win the Wembanyama sweepstakes. Like that's something that could accelerate their timeline quite a bit. So they have not. I think they did like 3 off seasons worth of rebuilding into one so far in the Mitchell trade. I don't even care what happens with the Mitchell trade from here because they got so much from the Gobert trade. I think they're set up to go in all different sorts of directions, but it is hard to sort of rate them higher for me when you can't look at a guy and say, well, he's going to be there and give them like a direction because at this point we know it's not going to be Mitchell as good as he is.
I'm with you 100%. I'm with you. That's exactly why I had them at 6. Like there's just not. We don't know what their nucleus is going to be yet, and it's hard to tell who's going to be the guy to build around. And you may be wondering, like, why do I have Orlando there? It's just I just have more faith in Danny Ainge, and I love the Gobert trade that much. Like Danny Ainge, for some reason, like he became kind of a meme on basketball Twitter up until this trade, and people were kind of like, I don't know what.
I would like to clarify. Anyone who thinks Danny Ainge wasn't making trades was missing the mark on this. It was all the reports that came out about all of the almost deals that he made, which is why it was funny. It's not that he didn't make moves. It's there were invariably leaks about how close the Celtics almost came to getting player right, X, Y, Z. Yeah.
I get the jokes, but the jokes went too far in that he became.
They always do.
He became the dunce, right? He became the guy who's out of touch, doesn't know what he's doing, isn't really freaking good at this job. Like, oh, well, what have the Celtics really done? Look at their draft history. They're it's a mixed bag.
He's really a sicko when it comes to this stuff because Utah hires him and he doesn't want to be involved in the day-to-day. All of a sudden they decide to blow it up. And it's like, he's just so hands-on right now. He just must live for this opportunity to tear things down and build it up, which I understand from just a challenge, like personal challenge perspective, like building something from the ground up rather than trying to enhance something that's already in place. It's going to be inherently more interesting if you appreciate that. It's just, I find it hysterical that as soon as they tear it down, he's like all in after kind of only wanting to be half in.
Well, I think, I just think he wanted to see, is this it? Is Mitchell and Gobert like an actual championship level, core?
I bet you if they would have given him the agency, he would have moved both of these guys as soon as he came on. I don't think he ever wanted to.
You think so?
I think it was kind of foretold in the way they handled last season. They made no upgrades at the trade deadline. They could have traded their 26 first, and they weren't even linked to anyone, like seriously linked. It just showed a lack of faith in what the core ceiling was, or maybe a disinterest in attaching stuff to them. And really quickly, what I really liked that they did this offseason, giving Will Hardy a 5-year deal, and I'll assume there's like a club option on the final year, even if the final two. I like that you give out that long-term contract because it gives you runway to actually rebuild. Like, you're not tethering this coach to, if we're not winning in 2 years, like, he really screwed up and we have to get rid of him. And so I think that's it shows to me at least that everyone's on the same page. And this is something that is going to happen gradually and over the long haul, which is something else you could appreciate about their rebuild. And conversely, you don't have that in San Antonio because we know Pop seems reinvigorated by coaching all these youngsters, just, watching and listening to him last season. But we know, like, he's not going to be around that much longer. And even if you think Quinn Snyder is going to be the guy who replaces him, like, you just don't know how that situation is going to pan out either.
Yeah, you also kind of wonder if the Pop thing is kind of like a Chris Paul situation, and that everybody's been saying he's gonna be washed soon. Just wait for it. And it's like 2022, and he's still like really good.
Washed. It's just like he's
no.
Whenever.
I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about like we're in Chris Paul, like we were talking about in 2013. Like, he's gonna fall off someday. He's gonna fall off, and it's like we're 9 years later, and he's still one of the best point guards in the NBA. And it's like, I could see the same thing with Pop. It's like, he's going to retire someday. And it's like, oh, it's 2026. And he's like a championship contender again. Like, the Spurs are, contenders again. He's the coach. Like, it would not surprise me.
That would be amazing.
Yeah. Nothing would surprise me there with Pop.
So 5, we're up to number 5, right?
I didn't get to put a bow on the Utah thing, man. Hold on.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. It's just the Gobert trade was fantastic, and he still has this massive bullet in the chamber, right? Like, what Donovan Mitchell receives on the open market is the big question remaining after Kevin Durant, right? Like, after Kevin Durant, he's the biggest domino left. And I just think if you're a team that's negotiating with Danny Ainge right now, you cannot let Rudy Gobert dictate the market no. We're not doing that. You got to be straight up front with that guy. You're like, no. Same thing if you're negotiating with the Nets and they're trying to use the Gobert trade as like, oh, this sets the market. No, it doesn't set the market. Like you're not gonna bully me like that. You can't let this one trade ruin the value of star players. So they still have a bullet left in the chamber, and I think they're probably gonna get a Gobert-esque package, right? Like, probably something similar, maybe not as much as they got for Gobert. Because I don't think a team is going to be as desperate to trade for Mitchell in the same way they were as desperate to trade for Gobert. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see when they really strip everything down, right? When Mitchell is gone, how bad they truly are next year. And if they're as bad as you and I expect them to be, because I think after they trade Mitchell, they're going to be really bad. I mean, you're talking about the Wembanyama / Scoot Henderson draft is going to be like 6 teams vying for that number, for one of those 2 picks. So it's going to be really fun to see how bad they bottom out. And I think because we just have no idea how far they could go with the asset chest, that's why I have them decide. That's why I have them over Paolo Banchero and Jalen Suggs, who, by the way, I think Banchero is perfect for Jalen Suggs. And I think he's going to allow him to be the kind of player I always envisioned him as. I don't think he can be like the number 1 A guy, but he can be like your off ball / can create as a secondary point guard. And I think that's perfect for him. While Banchero is the guy, the straw that stirs the drink. So that's why the discrepancy lies there. Where are we on the list? Number 5?
I'm up to my number 5, which
okay.
I have the Pacers here. I love Tyrese Halliburton. Think he has his highest end range outcome is a lot better than people think. I love Benedict Mathurin. I'm like, Chris Duarte is fine. That's kind of how I feel about the rest of their roster. What's very encouraging. I mean, Jalen Smith had a great close to last year. They can still trade Miles Turner, who's been in trade rumors since I think he entered the league at this point. But what I think is encouraging, aside from having Halliburton in place with Benedict Mathurin, and even look, I know some people are higher on Chris Duarte than I am. That's fine. I love O'Shea Brissett as well. It does seem like the Pacers are actually rebuilding, because I know they gave out the 8 and offer sheet, but that by the end of that, it was clearly a favor to the agent Bill Duffy. Like, it wasn't you do something and there's like a 2% chance that the Suns don't match that or whatever it is. They didn't do anything to try and accelerate their position, which historically the Pacers have tried to avoid full tilt rebuilds at all costs. And the fact that they're not, I think that's super encouraging. It gives Halliburton time to grow. It should ensure that Rick Carlisle is giving Benedict Mathurin a crap ton of opportunity this year. And it also implies and suggests that your draft pick is going to be better next year too. And so if we're just counting on one more year of them getting a high lottery pick to add to Mathurin Halliburton, that's really intriguing. And what they also seem prepared to do, just based off the third party rumor mill, is they will be a team that takes on bad money this year. If they could be a Westbrook team if the Lakers attach whatever first to it. And so that's also encouraging because it shows that you're willing to try and acquire some more first round picks. I like the direction they're headed in. I do think, though, there's not a lot of whole proven commodities or upside there. Like we're talking about star upside aside from Tyrese Halliburton. If you feel that Benedict Mathurin is going to be a superstar, the off the dribble shooting was he's a lot more of that than I expected when I was first looking into him coming out of school. But you're also like, that's sort of it. Like you still need to fill out the rest of this rebuild. And it's like, do you think Isaiah Jackson or Gogo Batadze is that guy or Jalen Smith? No. So they're still in the infancy, but for them to actually be in the middle of the pack, despite being in the infancy of their rebuild, is actually a pretty good spot to be in.
Yeah, so I have the Kings here. The Pacers are going to be next, so it's not like we disagree too much. We disagree about the Kings a lot. So let me explain why. So this was De'Aaron Fox since the Halliburton trade. Like 28 points per game, 6 assists per game, 4 rebounds per game, like 70% true shooting. Like he is ridiculous. I think people have forgotten how good this guy is. Last year, in the first half of last year, I think was kind of flukish, right? I don't think that's going to happen again. I think he's going to come into this season and look like one of the best young guards in the NBA again, like reestablish himself in this conversation. When we talk about the best players under 25, I think he's going to be in that conversation again next year. And I think, I really believe he can be one of the best guards in the NBA. He is so quick. There's really nothing he can't do like off the dribble. Like he can shoot, he can dribble, he can pass. Like there's nothing he can't do. He's not like an amazing shooter, but he's good enough to where I can trust him taking off the dribble threes, especially off of screens. And I think, he can be a really decent facilitator. I think playing next to Halliburton stunted his development a little bit, like in that they were both guys who needed the basketball in their hands. And I think Fox is someone who suffers more when he doesn't have the ball than Halliburton. And that's why I think Halliburton's better, right? Halliburton can do more off the ball. And I think that's him just getting a full year at the helm, with the Kings. I love Keegan Murray. I love, what they've surrounded him with. Like they have a good mixture of guys there. Like, I mean, when you look at their core, Sabonis, Fox, Keegan Murray, like that's a really good core. And I think Murray showed that, this guy could be like your third best player on a championship team. Like, is that crazy? Is that crazy?
Keegan Murray showed that already?
Yeah, I think.
Can we give him a regular season game first before we go that far?
Okay, well, I mean, we're talking about Paolo Banchero in such a highlight where he could be the best player on a champion team or second best player. I mean, Keegan Murray was like what, the 4th overall pick? Like, is that crazy to say that he can be the 3rd best player? I mean, I don't think I'm reaching. I don't think I'm saying anything crazy. I think he is so good on both ends of the floor. And he was really underrated as a shooter coming out of it. Like we really focused a lot on Jabari Smith Jr. as a shooter coming into the draft, right? We ignored, for the most part, how good Murray was. Because he didn't start off as a prospect that could shoot this well. But he can shoot this well. And he's just so flexible and malleable in how you use him as a player. Sabonis is very good. I understand what, you maybe defensively in the modern NBA, maybe you don't want him starting at center, but I think he was capable. I think he's a capable center. Like he can get to league average, and I think a league average defensive center next to Keegan Murray, next to I'm sorry, I'm missing. The name is escaping me.
De'Aaron Fox, Harrison Barnes, Davion Mitchell.
Harrison Barnes. I'm sorry, Harrison Barnes and Davion Mitchell. I was thinking of Harrison Barnes though. Next to Harrison Barnes, and I think Davion Mitchell can obviously defend. Like that's good enough. Like that's good enough defensively. You have like what, 2 liabilities in there, maybe? Like that's when you were talking about building a team out. I mean, they make sense to me.
So the things I'll take issue with are, I think if I'm still harping on the Halliburton trade in the sense that if it was because you were worried about taking the ball out of De'Aaron Fox's hands, that's like Sabonis doesn't make that any easier. He's a player that's better off with the ball in his hands too. and there's more natural, organic two-man game stuff you can run with them. I understand that. And the fit looked pretty interesting. They're both liabilities on defense right now, flat out. Turner covered up with so much that Sabonis did. And that's an issue. So my question here is I everything you said about Keegan Murray, Harrison Barnes, I like that they've at least decided like we're not going to unless they think Mike Brown is going to work magic. I would bet on this team being a bottom 10 defensive team.
I don't think so. Yeah, I see that see, this is where we disagree. I think they're going to be a playoff team next year, or at least competing for the play-in, because I think they're going to get league average defense.
So I'll be shocked if they do that. But let's say they do. What is the path to them getting better than this now?
De'Aaron Fox getting better.
That's
right, like De'Aaron Fox playing, like if he puts those stats up for a full season, right?
I think we've seen him do it for the full season, or we've seen like a lot of this half, 3/4 season from stuff from De'Aaron Fox, and I love De'Aaron Fox. I think he's way better than people. They critique him because he struggles earlier in the season, and he had it was like more than half the year he was like tearing it up last year, and it was the same thing before the other season. I think he has the potential to get better defensively. This might be a Devin Booker situation where you put better players around him and you start competing, and Devin Booker starts defending better, and maybe that happens with De'Aaron Fox. I just don't think they've really hamstrung themselves to this is it to me. They either need Sabonis isn't going to get a lot better. I know he's still on the younger side, but they've tethered themselves to Fox has to make another leap, which is this is the hardest leap to make. You're going from fringe all-star to what? All NBA player? Do I think he's capable of it? Sure. But there's that. And then there's Keegan Murray being better than expected, because I think you can say, fine, if the concept is we want him to be the third best player on a title team, great. If he turns into that player, you're still not a title team, because I don't know that you have right now. You don't have the player who's going to be the best player on a title. Do you think Fox is going to be the best player on a title team? And there's too many what ifs here when it comes to the actual players, where it's okay. Well, what if Fox gets better defensively and makes the leap to All NBA? What if Sabonis gets better defensively as the primary big and backline defender? What if Keegan Murray or Harrison Barnes can handle defending wings so that they can play together? Because both of them sort of give me the feel of they're more fours than wings. And then what is Keegan Murray overall? And the what ifs are fine, but now you've taken it to the point where you traded a pick that, if we're being honest, probably isn't going to convey for at least the next 2 years, which then really handcuffs you in trade talks for the next 2 years. I just don't see their pathway to making the type of leap that they need to. This feels like a situation so combustible that they're more likely to eventually tear it down within the next 2 years than to actually take a step forward to me.
Well, I mean, we haven't even seen them take that first step forward, right? Which is why I think you have kind of a 1 or 2 year buffer for them to just be a fun playoff team. Why can't they be a fun playoff team for a year or two before they have to start making these tough decisions? And I realize you said that they don't have someone that could be the number one, right? You're not sold that they have that guy on the roster. The Pacers don't have that guy either, right? I have them in the same group. I have the Pacers higher because I like Halliburton more. I like Turner a little bit more than Sabonis, but they're kind of in the same kind of play, team tier.
The Kings have better talent, but the Pacers have more avenues to get better talent than the Kings right now at this point. The Kings if you're thinking they're going to be a playoff team, their draft, maybe if they send out their first round pick this year, if they're that good, it changes everything that they can do in trade talks. I just don't think they're going to be that good, but you're also not sitting on this pot of gold when it comes to your draft pick, even if you trade it after the fact, probably, because you're actively chasing the 10 seed. And I just don't, they are like the Charlotte Hornets of the West right now, where you could call the Hornets are rapidly turning into the Kings of the East, however you want to frame it. I don't respect that they are actively trying to stay in the middle. I think that's unfair to fans. And I know some
fans
people
that haven't seen a playoff team in 14 years.
The play-in is not the playoffs.
No, I said playoff. I said,
you think they're going to be top 6 in the West? Where are Golden State, Phoenix, the Clippers, the Nuggets, the Timberwolves, the Pelicans, the Blazers are going to be in there?
I mean, I don't think they're going to be top 6, but I think they can be top 8. I'm not dismissing that for next year.
That's still play-in territory, though, is my point.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I see them going into the play-in and comfortably winning the play-in, whereas maybe you see them going into.
Need to bookmark this disagreement and revisit it once the playoffs roll around.
Well, hey, I'm open to it. I'm open to being wrong about the Kings. I
could be wrong too, because we're both veering, I think, to two extremes.
Right. I mean, I just think like this idea of them tearing it down before they even like see the playoffs. Like I want to see them make like teams that tear it down at least get a taste of the playoffs, right? Like and like they haven't even gotten a taste yet. They haven't even gotten to actually contend for the opportunity to make the playoffs. And I think that could happen next year. Like I really think like their team as a structure makes sense to me. They have two defensive liabilities and they're so far away from each other, right? On the positional spectrum, right? Like you can cover for them easily, and that every player in between there is a positive defender, right? And like I have no problem with
Is
like
Kevin
have
Herter, Malik Monk, like those guys who are like who is starting? You're assuming it's Davion Mitchell and Fox in the
kind of
backcourt
has
with
to be.
Murray, Barnes, and Sabonis.
Yeah, kind of has to be. I
I
think
don't think
that's
you can. I would be shocked if they Davion Mitchell, just because that's a lot of like you're really shrinking the floor there with him and Sabonis, and then even Fox.
he plays bigger than his size though. I thought that was an unfair like criticism of him coming out of the draft. Like people really marked him for that, and because of that, he got drafted too low, right?
Well,
And
I
like
meant shrinking the floor in the sense like
yeah,
spacing.
yeah. Right. Oh, shrink. Oh, in terms of spacing. Yeah, I guess I am banking a little bit on player development. I think that's fine. Like I think De'Aaron Fox can become a. I mean, I think he's a good shooter now, like passable as a catch and shoot guy. I think he can get to a good, become a good to great catch and shoot guy, and I think Davion Mitchell can become passable, right? I don't think that's too crazy to ask player development wise. Otherwise, like, what's he gonna do in the NBA if he can't shoot threes, like off of catch and shoot? He's not going to make the NBA. So I think he kind of knows that he has to become that guy. So I think there is an urgency to work on that player development, and because that urgency exists, I'm banking on it. I'm banking on it working out. Um, and I have no problem with like betting on this team. I really don't, because again, intellectually they make sense to me. Like as they have three good defenders in the starting lineup, they have two liabilities, and I think one of them is not as much of a liability as especially when you surround them with good defenders. Like I think they're fine. I could think they're when you talk about the other teams on this list, like the best player there is De'Aaron Fox, right? He's actualized his potential more than a lot of these players here, right? Like
I think that is fair to say. Yeah.
right. Like he's probably one of the best players on this list of teams already, and I think that's kind of why I have them. Where is this fourth or fifth on the list?
You have them at 5, I think. I have 4
Yeah,
teams left.
yeah, I have them fifth. Like fifth is what I think they're the fifth best rebuilding team on the list. That's not a hot take.
No, it's not, I guess it's not a hot take, but to me it is because I think that they're just not. They don't think they're rebuilding, and I think that's a problem for this exercise. Is my point. The Spurs and the Jazz and everyone else, maybe except for the Blazers, know they're rebuilding,
Okay.
and the Kings and Blazers do not know that.
Okay. I know you have a hard out, so we're gonna try to rush through this. So I have I think similarly to you on the Pacers. I have them fourth, right? Like you have them fifth. I had them fourth. It's like I think they're really good. I think Tyrese Halliburton, especially as a facilitator, getting the ball in his hands and having him be the lead guy is going to be so fun to watch for a full season. Like this is going to be like his come out year, and that he gets to post a full season of like 10 assists per game, right? I think that's realistically in his future. Like he can be that guy. And he's such a great shooter, obviously. Miles Turner is like one of the best defenders in basketball that nobody knows about. Like nobody talks about him enough as one of the best players in basketball. You know that. A lot of the top national guys know that, but we don't talk about him as like a perennial defensive player of the year guy. And he is that kind of defender. And when you talk about having that nucleus, that kind of facilitator running your offense and that kind of defensive player running your defense, like you have two very solid building blocks there, and you're still terrible. And so you can get top draft picks.
I think for fourth this is where it starts to get really tough, actually. And I'm like waffling between Orlando and Detroit. I think I'm going with Detroit, who has the best player, inarguably, of the 4 teams that we're about to talk about in Cade Cunningham. I just don't know enough about the rest of their roster. Sadiq Bey is good. Jaden Ivey should be a good fit, but like we need to see how that plays out. I think Jalen Duren is fine, but where other teams have accumulated these, when you look at Houston and OKC, even Orlando they have a Nuggets pick out into the distance, I think in 25. They have the Bulls pick in 23. Like the Pistons haven't picked up all these extra assets. They've been creative enough, but I still to me, they haven't surrounded Cade Cunningham with enough shooting just yet, but this is someone who I expect. Like Cade Cunningham is best player in the NBA material, and I don't feel that way. Paolo Banchero, maybe. Jabari Smith Jr. or Jalen Green, like maybe, but like I'm very sure that Cade Cunningham is best player in the NBA material. So it's hard for me to put them this low. But, and I don't want to say they don't have a lot else going on aside from him, because they do. They have good players. But I think I need to see, like, okay, what does Jaden Ivey look like? Or does Killian Hayes start this season how he finished last season, which was very strong and had like a nice little in-between game and was getting the basket more. So it just feels weird to say that about the Pistons when they have a ton of financial flexibility moving forward. I think when we're at this level with the final four teams, it's going to be a matter of splitting hairs for me anyway. And that's why I just have Detroit at 4. It's a matter of preference thing.
Right. I think the trend seems to be I'm valuing practicality, or like actual, like what you've actualized your potential, so I'm going to rank you higher, and you're like projecting more, right? Especially with assets, it seems to be the trend, right? Like, and
Right.
I think this is kind of my asset, got my asset pick right here. I have OKC here on the list. I think OKC is, I love Chet Holmgren. I love Chet Holmgren. Like, he was my number one player in the draft. I thought he was excellent. Like especially defensively at the summer league level. What did not surprise me, what he could do with the ball in his hands. I think a lot of people were surprised that he had that kind of capability. I'm like, man, you got to watch his high school tape. The guy was a really good creator. He just, was playing in a system where he didn't have to be that guy. He was kind of a play finisher. And I think he can be, it would not surprise me if he's like a second best player on a championship team level kind of guy. I don't see the best player on a championship team here though. I like Shea a lot. I like Shea. I'm not going to say that I don't see him on this roster long term, but I would bet against it. I think I would probably say that, it's more likely that, Giddey, Holmgren, like these other guys stick around versus Shea.
Oh,
It's not.
okay.
Yeah. I just think I'd see a trade there coming for him. And I think they'll get decent assets for him, because that's what Sam Presti does. Sam Presti gets good trade, gets good assets, and I think they have a lot of flexibility to move up. Again, this is that part of the list where it's like, if I'm not ranking you at number 1, this is not an insult. You're very solidly positioned. Like,
I think we've like diverged in a lot of spots, but we have the same 4 teams in the top 4. So I think that shows that it's sort of a matter of splitting hairs.
Right. Yeah. It's, again, like, I don't think if I'm putting you here as opposed to number 1, like there's like probably one factor that prevented you from being number 1. Right. And like for the Thunder here, it's like, I just don't see the number 1 guy there. Sure, there's a lot of avenues to gain that number 1 guy, and probably more avenues for a lot of these other teams. But a lot of these other teams, I can see the number 1 guy that's possibly there. Right. Like, I could see Jalen Green becoming that number 1 guy. I could see Cade Cunningham becoming that number 1 guy. I can't see anyone on the Thunder becoming that number 1 guy. Right. And that's kind of why sorry.
I was going to say that's something we definitely disagree on, but we'll get to that when I actually have the Thunder, which I do not, obviously, right now.
Okay. Yeah, I like Chet a lot. I think he's probably my favorite player on this team because of how malleable he is as a basketball player. And like, I think no matter what kind of team construct you build, you'll be able to comfortably fit him, because he can adjust offensively and defensively to what you want to do, because he's that smart. And he's that capable skill wise. So yeah, that's kind of where I have him on the list. Again, they have a lot of assets. They have a lot of room to improve, but until they actually execute some of these trades and move some of these assets, I'm not an Ousmane Dieng guy, by the way. I hated him. I hated that trade.
They have Chip Anglin now with him working on Ousmane Dieng shooting. I don't know. I feel like that could be a sneaky win.
But who's going to work on his basketball is kind of my question. Like,
oh, come on. That guy's like a ball mover and like can really disrupt on defense.
I hate it. Like, I was watching him, like, what is he good at? Like, when I was watching him in preparation for the draft, I'm like, why are people so much higher on him than I am? Like, I don't understand it. What I came to is like, he is kind of rangy skill wise. He is really long and athletic. And like, okay, so like you can see him being like a 6'10" ball handler type, right? And like you can see putting him with like a good player development coach, and that being the difference to him actually being like a good basketball player. Where it's like, I see him as more like Bruno Caboclo. He's very boomer bust, right? Like, and like, here's the thing. Guys like Giannis were Bruno Caboclo. Giannis was that kind of guy, right? He was boomer bust as well. and he actualized that potential. So like, I guess I'm betting on the bust part of this. I could see him being a bust.
If he's a bust, I don't think it changes their trajectory much. Is the thing.
Well, no,
So,
I
like,
just wanted to mention that while I was talking about them. Yeah, I
uh,
have them 4 again. Like,
I I have the Magic at 3, and I feel like not confident about this. I am a big believer in Banchero. I thought from the moment I did my draft prep, which was after March Madness ended, so it wasn't like I was early on this. I thought he was but like very clearly, I don't want to say by far, like should have been the number 1 pick. The offensive skill package, like this is someone who can lead the offense of a championship team. And he might be the best passer on the Magic from day one. He might not be
probably
because you do
is.
have,
Yeah.
he might be, but
Markel.
he could be. And
Yeah.
long term, they have a nice base. We both still believe in Jalen Suggs. I do think that's a big part of this is if you want their future to really hit, you need Jalen Suggs to be great. Otherwise, they might get to a point, which is why I'm high on them. You have Franz Wagner, you have Wendell Carter Jr. who's really good. Mo Bamba became a basketball player last year, and they played a lot of dual big stuff with him and Wendell Carter Jr. They have Jonathan Isaac coming back, who still says he's not fully healthy in his last interview. I don't know what you trust him for aside from defense, but they have a lot of good, even like Chuma Okeke, I'm still intrigued. If he hits more of his threes, I'm like all in on Chuma Okeke all of a sudden. I want to still believe in RJ Hampton, but my belief is waning. Cole Anthony's a fine, like microwave scorer off the bench. It's just they feel like they do have some other assets, and I'm not saying they haven't played their best hand already because they could go after a trade package if they wanted to. But it's like you need Banchero to very much be the guy so that you could shoot up this list. And just because he hasn't played, Jalen Green has played regular season basketball already. Paolo Banchero is not. And so it's just fair to be like, I'm trusting Jalen Green's, even though I think Paolo Banchero is going to be the better player, I have to trust what I've seen from Jalen Green, especially post All-Star break or whatever it was, over not seeing anything from Paolo Banchero. But that dude's shot making and passing packages all over the place. And I think he'll wind up being a better defender than people think. I think that there'll be some real switch to him. And so they have some depth already. They have some immediate contributors already. And this is a team that their best players right now, or their most intriguing players in Suggs, Banchero, Wagner, even Wendell Carter Jr. is super young. They're all going to continue to improve. And so this team is exciting. And I think what people, and I'll say the same about Houston, because they're going to have a boatload of cap space soon. Houston and Orlando are like two of the more underrated free agency destinations for if they're good and they have money in a market with good players, there will be players that look at them. It's kind of like, I wouldn't say they're as under the radar as Phoenix was in certain summers, but you forget when these teams haven't been good for a minute or had cap space for a minute in Houston's case, that players want to play there. And so like being able to cake in that, which you can't do with Detroit, you can't do with OKC, that matters.
Can't do it with Portland for sure.
You could probably do it with Portland more than you could do it with OKC or Detroit, though.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, it's easier to move those contracts.
There seem like there are people in the NBA and around the NBA, including myself, that might die for Damian Lillard. So like that dude's leadership is off the charts. People want to play with him. They convinced like Melo to want to go there when there were still like other teams that sort of wanted Melo. Obviously, they didn't convince Prime Melo to go there when they wanted him, but I think Portland would be an underrated destination too. But no, you're right. They're not like, if they have cap space and it's between Portland and like New York or LA or Golden State or with Chicago or whatever, like, no, Portland's probably not winning that battle.
Yeah, I'm gonna dodge the Damian Lillard leadership conversation. Like I'm just gonna, that's one of my landmines. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna step on it. So I have two teams left here, and I have basically Detroit and Houston. Doesn't matter which order.
Oh, so you already went into, what about?
Yeah, I went into Orlando right before Utah. Remember?
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I have. I would probably say I would have Houston second and Detroit first. I don't have a problem with Orlando being higher on the list. I just, that's just me being really high on Utah mainly. But yeah, I really like what Houston's doing. Like I think roster wise it makes sense. Big Şengün guy. I think he becomes a fixture in the national conversation next year. I'll say that. Like he's gonna get. Yeah, I think he's gonna get a starting spot. He's gonna get the starting spot next year. I think he's gonna put up ridiculous numbers. Like I'm talking like 18, 10, and like 3 or like 4. Like I could see him putting up monster numbers and having like 20, 10, and 5 nights. Like I'm a huge Şengün guy. Like I think he's like one of the best passers in the league as a center. Like easy, probably like number 2. I mean, I other than Jokic, I can't think of a center off the top of my head that passes better than him. He is so good in the post. Like his footwork is like ridiculous. Like he can legitimately body down low. He's 6'9". That's gonna be that's gonna be an issue defensively. But Jabari Smith Jr. was a great pick in that respect, and that you can hide a lot of his weaknesses now. I think, you know, I'm not a big KPJ guy, but I think
Nor am I. And Rockets fans get mad at me, especially on YouTube, every single time it comes up.
Yeah, and like that's not like okay. I'm a KPJ guy in that I can see him being a good NBA player, right? Like that's in that respect I am, but I don't see him as a starting point guard. I think he can be like a 6-man type, you know, one of your 4 best guards, and that's good enough to be in the playoffs. That's a good enough player to be in the playoff rotation. I can see him playing in important playoff games in the future. You know, I can see him having a long career. You know, I think he's very shifty, very skilled. Can be like an easy, if he was a 6-man, be an easy 6-man of the year guy. I'm not dismissing the possibility that he can be a starter. I just haven't seen enough yet for me to actually envision him as that kind of guy.
He never even took like when they gave him the keys. And at first, like, was that 2 years or a year and whatever change ago at this point? Like it looked like he made some progress as sort of a floor general type, but it never maintained. And like where Anthony Simons last year, I thought made strides as like making the simple reads, setting up his teammates, drawing the attention of defenses. KPJ's decision making just feels too all over the place to be like, that's someone who can actually run the offense, not just score, but someone who can actually run the offense consistently.
Yeah, I think he's like again, I can see him being good. I can't see him being a guy that's gonna be your starter, being your floor general. Jalen Green after the All-Star break played like an All-Star point blank. He was awesome. Like he was scoring at like a ridiculous clip in the paint and from mid range. So I think the mid range is going to level out a little bit. He'll be kind of like an average mid range guy, like a 35% from mid range, which is actually decent. You know, it's not great, but I think he'll be like that kind of guy. And I think he'll be a very good shooter, especially because he moves so well off the ball. Like that's probably one of his under talked about talents is like he's constantly moving when he doesn't have the ball. And that's going to serve him so well, especially playing against playing next to Alperen Şengün. Like Şengün's going to constantly find him for dunks, layups, open threes when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. And with the ball in his hands, incredibly shifty, gets by guys at will. Like last year, when he was struggling, he was still getting by guys without screens. Like that first step is so fast. He's getting to past defenders like already on day one. And, you know, once he starts incorporating more pick and roll, once he starts, you know, like playing smarter, I would say, and being more comfortable in that position as kind of like a lead guy, I think it's going to be look even better. You know, can he be the best player on a championship team? Man, he really needs to get better as a passer for me to actually like say he can for sure. He needs to get better as a defender, right? That's a big weakness of his. I think long term, I could see him becoming average. But if he becomes average, KPJ has to be like a plus guy to play him next to Green, right? And that's again another struggle with KPJ. If KPJ was that starter, like legitimate bona fide, can see him as a starter. That's a plus defender. That's like a 7 assists per game playmaker. You know, might be number 1 on my list, right? You know, I have questions about his defense. I have questions about his efficiency. I have questions about his turnovers, right? And Jabari Smith Jr. I never saw that top end like can be the best player on a championship team when I was, you know, watching him. I was like, nah, I think he's gonna be kind of a complimentary kind of star, like at best second best player on a championship team, probably third, right? Şengün is really why I have him this high on this list, right? Şengün and Green, like they just make sense together, right? Especially if you surround them with complementary defensive players, that's a core that makes sense. And that as far as Detroit, again, I'm with you. I'm a big Cade guy. I was a little worried about the shooting. It never normalized. You know, he never got back to like being like a plus 3-point shooter, which he was in college. He was like a 40% 3-point shooter in college, but he was like a 90% free throw guy. Right, this year I think it was like 85 to 90%.
Yeah, the level of difficulty on his shots was absurd, and so I think if those get easier, or just as he gets older, he'll be fine.
So I hope that normalizes, right? Like so. If that's why I think I think he's the best guy of these two teams. I think he could be the best player there. Ivy, love Ivy. Like I flirted with the idea of putting him third on my big board before the draft, ahead of Jabari Smith Jr. I really like Ivy, especially as just a downhill guy that can be your secondary creator. And with Cade there, he doesn't have to be the primary guy anymore, which is why I think this is a great fit. And yeah, that's kind of why I have this. Why I kind of have it 1-2 Detroit and Houston.
So I have Houston too, and I don't really have anything to add to what you said. You're definitely higher on Şengün than I am. I think the defense is going to be an issue, and I'm higher on Jabari Smith Jr. Like I think he has his best case outcome is better than Şengün's, and his defense in summer league, some of the plays he made really sold me there. But they're just well set up, and the actual stuff I had to add to what you said, like Usman Garuba is still there. The Eason pick I really liked. The Ty Washington and some
yeah.
Washington, like that. He's small, but he plays on defense bigger than he actually is. And yes, I'm still a believer in Garuba, even though I didn't really play him last year. That's someone who could be a defensive monster. And if Jalen Green makes a leap as a passer, like it's very easy with Şengün already there to just go sort of without a point guard. And that might make it easier to formulate the defense because you can just prioritize defense next to Jalen Green rather than facilitation. And they have all those Nets picks coming in plus cap space. So there's a way for them to get better aside from internal growth. And look, they're probably by design going to have another high draft pick themselves next year, whether it's because they exercise their swap with Brooklyn or use their own pick, depending on whatever happens with the Nets. So they're set up really well. And I have OKC 1 because there are a lot of encouraging signs I think we've seen from them. I'm a big believer that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander can be best, or if he's not the best player on the championship team, he's as good as you can be without being the best player on a championship team. Okay. His defense has slipped since he's been in OKC, but you have to look at the spacing he's working with on offense and the degrees to which he's had to create. Very few players in the league have taken more on assisted field goals the past 2 years. I think it's like Trae Young and Luka, and that's it, if I'm not mistaken. So like his role is going to get easier now that Chet Holmgren is there, another safety valve. I like that they kept Lou Dort, who by the way is only going to be 26 when that deal is up. I'm not a Josh Giddey guy, although he looked like he was a juggernaut in summer league. As a passer, a rebounder, size on defense, fine. But like he needs to bring up, his floater. He showed some of that last year, but like he needs to prove to me that he can hit sort of this set jumper from three, which we just have not seen yet from him. And so I'm waiting on that. And then they have still all these picks, and they've shown now that because there's this roster spot crunch, they're prepared to use them. They already gave up 3 conditional firsts for Ousmane Dieng, who I like. I don't think he's going to be a star, but as sort of this connective tissue on offense, if he starts hitting set jumpers and then someone who disrupts on defense, I like what they have going there. I love the Holmgren pick as well. And it does seem like, based off everything we've heard from them, from Shai on how much he's talked with the organization behind the scenes, it does feel like that they're committed to Shai and they extended him. And so if you believe they're going to move Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, then yeah, you should absolutely lower them on this list. But if you're someone like me who thinks that they're going to give this like a more aggressive shake moving forward, there's just so much that they can do flexibility wise and talent wise.
I wonder how much I'd like their, team construct more if they had taken Kuminga more, or if they had just kept Şengün instead of, eventually, trading Şengün for what became Ousmane Dieng. Like that's kind of a iffy decision. Like long term, they're betting on Dieng's, versatility as a defender, as a passer, as a ball handler. I get it, but if he doesn't work out and Şengün becomes like what I think he can become, that's a really scary bet. It's a really scary bet because that really did cost you the asset. Like, you've traded the assets. You can't do anything to recover unless you can get something for Dieng at that point. But
there's also the catch-22 of that is if you have Şengün and you're playing him, are you too good to get the number 2 pick and then you don't get Chet Holmgren, who I think is going to be exponentially better than Şengün?
Exponentially. Okay. Yeah. You know what? I don't think that's a crazy statement. Okay. So yeah, okay. I see what you're saying, but I'm not sure if Şengün would have made them that good.
No, I mean, they would have shut him down too, knowing the Thunder.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I would probably say like that's the one mistake. Like I guess it's 2 mistakes because they did compound it by trading for Dieng, who I do not like. Seems like you're higher on him than I am, but like it's really a case of like what you think of Giddey. If you think Shai is going to be there long term, I don't think Shai is going to be there long term. What you said about
I said that was I wrapped it up with like Shai. If you think they're going to move Shai, then yes, I would lower them too. I just don't think I think it's more likely he's in OKC 2 years from now than he's not. And like I'm not really a big believer in Giddey. Like I said, he needs to hit a set jump shot for me to believe in him, especially if you want to sort of maximize the dynamic you have with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But they were already kind of like sneaky okay on defense last year. And they're sort of built like with Dort and Holmgren. And if Shea picks up, having Giddey, Jalen Williams, by the way, look fantastic in summer league for stretches. Having Usman Jang, like they've Kenrich Williams too. Like these are guys like they've have some actual good players already on the roster and a ton of upside swings as well. I like that balance. And I think you probably didn't factor this in as much, but while you don't like Jang, the fact that they made a consolidation trade in part because they just have no roster spots. Like they're getting to a point where like these guys are under contract. You haven't looked at them very long. And now you don't have roster spots for all these first rounders. But I like that they finally did. Hey, we like Jang. That's our guy. So we're going to consolidate these 3 conditional picks into one. And so that shows to me that there's at least a mindset of, yeah, maybe next year they're still sort of rebuilding, but maybe they don't shut anybody down. I just think they're operating on more of a concrete and not accelerated, but like just a concrete timeline than people have credited them for.
They also did manage to come out of the offseason with like +1 pick or like -1. Like they actually did not consolidate as much as you might think. Like they were still like pick total at the beginning of the summer versus pick total now. It's actually not that different. So
they might get to a point just because of how good Houston's trajectory seems, and then like how good the Clippers sort of still are. Those picks in theory like don't feel like they're going to be as sexy as when we were first talking about them that OKC is getting. So does that lead them to move them and maybe they make another consolidation trade? It could also work out not in their favor because like I said, Houston feels like it's on the right track. And so the picks, when they start conveying, I think the first is in 24, right? To OKC. I don't think there'll be a contender, but like we might not be talking about this lottery pick that everyone assumed it was going to be.
No, I think, that's kind of why I didn't mention the Brooklyn picks when we talked about Houston, because I think because Brooklyn decided to blow it up as quickly as they did, those Nets picks actually may end up being the reverse, right? We baked in the Nets picks being possibly really, really good because Kevin Durant was going to be like 39 when they started conveying, right? Like now Kevin Durant might be gone, right? Now Kyrie Irving might be gone. They might trade Ben Simmons again, right? Like they might be in a situation where they tear it down, and by the time those Nets picks really start getting juicy, they're not as juicy anymore, right? So that's kind of why I baked that. What your mentality on OKC's picks, I kind of baked that in on Houston's picks moving forward. And like really, it is. I guess a lot of what's driving your ranking on OKC is like. I don't actually disagree with you ranking them high. I do disagree with the Shea thing. I like Shea a lot, and he played really well. I think he had like a 57. He's like a career 57% true shooting guy. He's like 24 points per game last year, like up to 6.5 assists or something off the top of my head. I haven't seen the stats in a minute, but like he's ridiculous. He's ridiculous, but I can't see him ever becoming like the best player on a championship team. And because he's not that guy at age 23. And because, they just drafted a 20-year-old and they drafted a 19-year-old last year, like I think they're kind of probably going to be in a situation where they might have to trade both him and Dort by the time they become good. But that's in a while, right? I can see that trade happening in like 3 years, not like in any time in the immediate future, right? So, yeah, I have no problem with you ranking OKC this high. I think we disagree on kind of the margins. I think, some of their decisions in the draft, with both with Jang and Şengün. I like Jalen Williams a lot. I thought that was a good pick. But in general, I just sometimes it kind of feels like they become, Giddey as well. I thought that I didn't really like that pick as much as others did. I thought, they were better. Yeah. Yeah. I think there were better players there. It kind of reads to me as hubris, right? Like you kind of think you're outsmarting the rest of the NBA market, where it's like, just take the obvious guy. Sometimes it's okay.
I mean, it could be, but I also respect. I mean, they certainly have a type. Like when you're looking at Jang, like they've gravitated towards that, and they want like big, like size and length is how. And they've decided they'll figure out shooting later. And I would just like to point out, part of this is like Chip England is all of a sudden there. And so him and Fred Vincent in New Orleans, like they're known as just like the shot doctors around the league. I'm not saying that Lou Dort's going to be a 45% 3-point shooter, but or Giddey's going to improve a bunch, or that Ousmane Dieng's going to be fine. But could you envision one of those guys, like let's say Dieng or Giddey, like being competent from 3-point range all of a sudden now that they have that type of like player development there? It's
sure.
Also, look, the West, ranking these teams in the West is just so futile because it's just like, to get really up there, I know some of these teams are going to phase in and out when we're looking at the top of but like teams like the Pelicans or the Wolves, like the Warriors having their youngsters there, like, and the Nuggets, like Jokic is still super young. Like a lot of these contenders aren't going anywhere. And some of them are probably going to get better. Like Dallas probably has to figure out its shit at some point around Luka, you would hope. So it's tough. And like, you could see, you're talking Houston or OKC, to me, they're almost interchangeable in the sense that, like, if we just jumped ahead 3 to 4 years, like, just so much changes in the NBA now, and it's so much harder still. I think the top of the West is still more, especially when the Clippers and Nuggets are both healthy. Like, that's a thicker, more robust top of the conference than the East has. And so that's going to be tougher inherently for you to crack.
Yeah, it is interesting. You feel this way about Shea, and it didn't feel that way about Fox. As in like that kind of level player they could possibly become. And like Fox was the guy with the pedigree,
Right. And look, he still is, but like, so I saw the way Shea defended basically his first 2 years in the league. And I've never seen that from De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah.
And the other thing is just like Shea offensively, and I know he was shut down like part of the way through and was injured, but you go back and watch that first season in OKC, his second season, the first of the rebuild. My God, man, like that dude looked like he was it. Like, and he was taking such difficult shots. If that never replicates, I think it really did hurt him last year a little bit playing with Josh Giddey. But now that you have like Chet Holmgren to help you open up the floor, Kenrich Williams, like I'm so high on Shea. Give me all like this. To me, that seems like the guy who could be an all NBA player that just doesn't get, like, when you look at players who haven't made an all-star team yet and aren't going into year 1 or 2 and like said, well, who could still make an all NBA team? Like, I look at Shea as that guy. I know some people might think it's Jaylen Brown, maybe it's De'Aaron Fox, whatever, but I think it's Shea.
Yeah. And as
Jaylen Brown made an all-star team, excuse me. I apologize.
No. I hear you. And as much as, I like what Monty McNair has done in Sacramento, like Sam Presti definitely has like a better reputation. Like he's just like the more proven general manager. Right. And like that like a lot of putting OKC this high, which, again, I don't disagree with anyone putting OKC as high as one on this list, is that organization is just one of the best in basketball. Right. Like I can, the reason I constantly say we need to forgive Sam Presti for the James Harden trade is because he's just done so much good since that point. Like I think he's wiped his slate clean. He's done more than enough to do that, like he's just one of the best GMs in basketball. One can make the case he's arguably the best general manager in basketball, right? He's in that conversation because, and, same thing with, the Kawhi Leonard whisperer, right? Like I think a lot of this is, they have a great program there. They have a great structure there, and banking in all that in the future rankings, I think it's, that's wise, because when you believe in the organization making these picks, making these long-term decisions, like you're more confident in their ability to make the right decisions, right? Like you're more confident that they'll make the right consolidation trade in the future, right? I think once they get in a situation where they have to trade 3 or 4 picks, I'm more confident that they're going to make a trade for like a real superstar versus like, Rudy Gobert, right? Like it's not, and I like Gobert, and I don't want to the Timberwolves here, but like I think Sam Presti's the guy to make the correct kind of move with those kind of picks.
For sure, I'm with you there.
Yeah. I sorry for wasting so much of your time, by the way. We did not plan to go this long. We did not plan to go at all. But we did manage to get a successful podcast in the books. Do you have anything you're working on? You want to plug your Twitter? Go ahead.
Yeah, just get at me on Twitter. It's my name that's on the screen, at Dan Favale, spelled like that, Favale. And then check out the Hardwood Knocks podcast, a seriously unserious NBA podcast. Hardwood Knocks, spelled exactly as it sounds.
You don't give yourself enough credit. It's the reason I wanted you on episode 250. I think you're very, very good at this.
I appreciate it, as the kind words usual. This was a blast, an unplanned blast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I always enjoy recording with you, Dan. If you're a fan of the podcast, please subscribe to the Apollo Houston YouTube channel where all these videos go. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up. Is that what it's called? Is that the YouTube lingo? Thumbs
I
up?
call it a like.
Yeah, give it a like, whatever it is. Again, I'm new to the space, so give the YouTube video a like. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, all that. Give us a favorable rating on iTunes because it helps other people find the show. Subscribe to RedNationHoops.com, the newsletter. If you want a free episode of this podcast every month, all you have to do is subscribe. And yeah, guys, have a good rest of your day.